So is it really going in that direction? If it is, do you have some example and some facts to support it?
There's passivity on the part of the elites, the people who run our country, the countries of Europe, on the part of the media, people who mostly live in nice neighborhoods where they send their children to nice private schools and that sort of thing. But among ordinary people who, if you sit down with people in a pub and have a couple of beers, and they get to feel that they can trust you, you'll hear a lot of rage, you'll hear a lot of frustration, you'll hear a lot of anger. Now, again, at the same time, what will happen? Will they? So far, people have just gone along. They've gone along with their leaders. But I do have a feeling that at some point they are going to say that this is too much and we have to do something. But then again, by the time that point comes, it may be too late.
Well, would you believe...
I just would say one thing. I think we have to hopefully be clear that we can't work with people with very liberal values, and we have to reject people like the BNP and parties like that. They actually hurt us because they actually unite Hindus and Jews and a variety and Muslims together in the fight against them, and instead of focusing us on the real issues. So they hurt our cause, and we should be careful not to ally ourselves with the BNP and other illiberal parties in Europe, etc.
I would certainly agree with that, and I would say that some of the people I know who are most in Europe who are the most frustrated about all this are people who are hardworking, law-abiding immigrants from other parts of the world who are non-Muslims, and some people from the Muslim world who actually thought when they came to Europe they were escaping all this horrible stuff. And some of the hardest working and best citizens in Norway, for example, are Vietnamese immigrants. They're great entrepreneurs. They start restaurants. I write while Europe slept, I write about this little Vietnamese restaurant I go to all the time, and how the site of the woman, it's a family-owned restaurant, and the woman who owns the restaurant was sitting one day at one of the tables with her little girl, helping her with her homework, and they were speaking Norwegian. They weren't speaking Vietnamese, they were speaking Norwegian, and the mother was speaking broken Norwegian, but the little girl of 6 or so was speaking perfect Norwegian. She sounded like a little Norwegian girl. Now that this is going to be a successfully integrated family, if there's still a Norway to be integrated into by the time that kid grows up, of course.
The reason I'm asking the question, and I want to push a little in that direction, it's because when you read a little bit America Alone, Mark Stein, the dynamics of demography seems to be saying that there's a passivity, and even this type of possible reaction may not even happen because of the dynamics of demography.
Yeah, well, nobody knows. Nobody knows what's going to happen. I mean, the most depressing conversation you can have when you sit around with a few people who are concerned about these issues is saying, okay, where are we going to be in 10 or 20 years? And there are different opinions, and sometimes I'm more optimistic than others. Sometimes I do think when I'm at events like this and I see people who take these things seriously, I feel there is a resistance out there, and other times not so hopeful. Other times not so hopeful.
Thank you very much for enlightening us with the real problem existing, And he just mentioned about the book America Alone, and also Ayaan Hirsi Ali's Infidel.
Yes.
I think the basic thing, they ask the question, why it is happening in that particular community, and why we have not been able to answer to that particular question of there are madrasas which are training these people, and this is what we get. Is there, in Europe, perhaps you have traveled a lot and you know that there are still madrasa exist?
Yeah.
In India and Pakistan, at least I know,
Yeah.
that in India there were many madrasas, but they have been stopped, and there is a little less violence now. In Pakistan, if you look, the other day I was reading that there are at least 12,000 to 13,000 madrasas are there. They are the one, perhaps, what you see, the terrorism, is the byproduct of those teaching, perhaps? Do you think that? Is there a way to perhaps answer this question before it becomes too, exposed?
Well, I'm not sure exactly what you're asking, but I certainly know that the madrasas are a breeding ground for this extremism. As I said, the parents in Europe, Muslim parents in Europe, to a very large extent, send their children to madrasas. In Norway, the main place is Pakistan. They send them to Pakistan, and all they learn about there is the Quran and Sharia, and the whole point of sending them there is so that they will not be integrated into Western values, so that they will come back to Norway and continue, living the way their great grandparents did in some village, and thinking the way they did, and that's the purpose, and it's allowed. They're allowed to do it. The government doesn't do anything about it. They're even thinking of helping subsidize it. This is Europe for you. Was there?
In Muslim world or in Arabic world, wherever there are madrasas, there you see that, well, there is always a problem.
Oh, yes.
But where there are not, perhaps there is less problem, So you have to address the problem of madrasas first.
Oh, absolutely. And the reason...
How do you address? That is the main
Well, India obviously has the answer. You close them down. The Hindus have the greatest experience with all this stuff of anybody. And Hindus have been living with this for a long time, and they see what the problem is. But the Europeans are the people who run Europe they're brainwashed by this multicultural mentality. In the Netherlands, I honestly don't know exactly how many madrasas there are, but there's a hell of a lot of them, and the government helps subsidize them. And it's total insanity. They should be closing them down. Of course they should.
And that's when I gave an event in Ottawa last April, and in question period, this guy stood up and he introduced himself, a young guy in his 20s, and he was from Brunei, and he grew up in Brunei, and he had immigrated to Canada, and a young guy, and he said, Brunei's a Muslim country, all my friends are Muslim, and they all went to England for education, and when they all came back after university, they were all radical. They got that in England, in the UK. Mm-hmm. That scared him. Really, he couldn't believe it.
There's a big problem there with Europe itself.
Yep.
Thank you.
Hi.
Hi.
I'm concerned about the press in these countries.
Yeah.
I think the situation, although in North America, it concerns me a lot. It concerns many of us. Still, we have a relatively healthy, wholesome situation, especially in the United States, in terms of a very diverse press and very well-funded institutes,
Yes.
think tanks, research institutes, which are putting out very slick, professional publications. You write for the City Journal.
Yes.
That's a wonderful one. You have magazines of very high quality.
Yeah.
So you get this tremendous diversity of opinion.
Yes.
It truly is a free press.
Yes.
What I'm hearing is that, or I get the impression from reading your book, from reading other books, that in Europe and especially in Scandinavia,
Yeah.
that the press is uniformly left, that there really is not an alternative press aside from the internet. So when you're writing, I don't know, do you have a day job or do
No,
you?
no, no. This is it, baby.
Okay. So when you're writing, where are you published in Norway, and where are you published in Europe? Are you only published over here? I mean, how are you do people know you in Oslo? Do you walk around and they say, oh, there's that guy, that American that writes all that inflammatory, horrible, hateful, Islamophobic stuff, or?
No, I've actually tried to keep a low profile in the country in
Probably a
which
good
I
idea,
live.
yes.
It's too tiny a country. You don't want that. And the thing is that there have been a couple of times when I've written things in the New York Times about Norway, and every time anyone writes anything in the New York Times about Norway, the next day, the front page of the Norwegian newspapers is article in New York Times about Norway, and then
Not unlike Canada.
yeah, and then you get the attention, and then you're vilified for a few days, and you get very nasty emails and phone calls and text messages. But I have written a handful of times opinion pieces in newspapers. They don't generally welcome unwelcome opinions, but there have been a couple of times when after I've been attacked, I've been allowed to respond. But mostly I've written for the website of the Human Rights Service, which is based in Oslo, and which my friend Hege, whom I mentioned, runs. I wrote a column there for a while. I've written several times for the blog in Denmark of the Free Press Society. It's these blogs are really. I mean, Europe owes a lot more to.
Are they the only source? Are there no
Yeah, I mean,
print outlets for?
Yeah,
for other
you're
opinions?
talking about think tanks and stuff. That's almost, especially in Scandinavia, that's a very new thing. And there are a couple of little think tanks, but they're not a big thing over there. And there's not these sources of funding, for one thing, for diverse opinions. The media are really the media establishment, especially as you said in Scandinavia. These are small countries. These people all went to journalism school together. There's one professor of journalism in Norway, and he used to be head of the Communist Party. So they come out of those of these courses, ranging from extreme left to extremely extreme left, and every now and then you'll get somebody who there are a handful of journalists in each of these countries who actually are reasonable and trying to get through get the message through about things like this. The Jyllandsposten is a terrific newspaper. Denmark actually has a better media picture than Norway or certainly Sweden. I mean, Sweden is just hopeless. But Jyllandsposten, the one that printed the Muhammad cartoons, that's a newspaper I have a lot of respect for. Yeah, I mean, you look at other, Le Figaro is a little bit to the right of Le Monde and so forth, but it's not that same breadth. There's not that same ideological breadth that you get in the States.
Maybe I'd like, if you allow me to, can we refine that question a little bit?
Yeah.
Is Europe experiencing the same thing that the McLean has experienced over here, where you have these pressure groups that are using like legal lawfare to basically intimidate newspaper, to force them to publish another perspective of what they have been offended with? So let's say, for an example, in the McLean's, they printed an article that was written by Mark Stein.
Yeah.
And some Muslims organization were extremely offended by it.
Yeah.
It was not necessarily anything that would be described that would fit the tab of the Human Rights Commission as described as hate speech. but yet these groups were offended, so they brought them